more it hurts. Okay, we are on Daf. Thank you.
Yud Zion?
Does Zion base?
Oh, look at that, the Mishnah.
We got the Mishnah right. Aloha base. Yud Zion base. Tes Zion base. Kelim Adikmar Betara. Vessels which are completed in purity, meaning that you're sure the whole time you maintain their tara the whole time from beginning to end. Nonetheless, they must be put in the mikveh before they use for the purposes of the Beis Hamikdash. But if you ensure the tara of the kelim from beginning to end of the process, they do not need tefillah before you use them for the purpose of truma, because trumas have a lesser degree of kedusha.
I am confused. Water will spread tumor, but you can use this mikveh and that'll take away.
Yeah, because it's in the ground and it's rainwater. There's special conditions of the mikveh. It's not blankets, it's not your bathtub. Okay, Haklima Tarif Masha B'Sochel Kodesh. This is a principle which we'll discuss at length tonight. If you have a vessel, let's say the vessel has, let's say this vessel, right? And you add in here, so in order for something to be makav, in order for something to become tameh or spread to it usually needs a certain measurement of the size of a beitzah. But let's say in this vessel you had pockets of stuff. You had a piece of dough over here, a piece of dough over here, a piece of dough over here, and a piece of dough over here. Now separately they do not make up. Separately they do not make up a gebeitzah, right? They don't make up the proper size. But if you combine them all together, they would, right? So now, for anything else, they have to actually be physically combined together in order for them all to become tameh together, in order for the tumah to spread from one to the other, in order to make up a shear. However, in Kodesh, even if they're separate, they're still considered combined by the vessel. Okay? The vessel combines them together. As opposed to B'Truma, below Truma, that's not the case. Harvi B'Kodesh, but something which is a fourth level of Tumah by Kodesh, puzzle, renders the Kodesh is unfit. The Shlishi B'Truma, the last level, however, by Truma is the level 3. Truma, furthermore, by Truma, Nidmeis Achas Miyadim, if one of its hands becomes Tameh, Chaver Tetzorah, the friend is still Tar. In other words, one hand Tameh does not make the other hand Tameh. Kodesh, if we're talking about Kodesh, Matbil Shteim, you have to be, if one of them becomes Tameh, you have to put both of them in the mikvah because both of them become Tameh as a result. So why is that? It should be instead of Vehayad, Shehayad, because the hand is Metamis Chavertas, Metami, its fellow by Kodesh, by Kodesh Avalo B'Truma. One hand makes the other totally by Kodesh, but does not do so by Truma. Tani, says the Gemara. Tani, Maisa B'Shabbos is a Maisa of a certain woman. Shoysa Regas Beged Echel B'Taro, she used to weave, she was weaving a garment and was purported to be Tar. Amra, so Baset Rabbi Shmuel Lishoel. And she came to Rabbi Shmuel to ask if she has freedom to a mikvah nonetheless. Amrlo, so she said, Yodasani, I know Shalom Nitma, that it was never become tummy. And Shlona Sati Daiti, I didn't pay close attention with Shomra, to make sure the upkeep and safeguarding the entire time consistently. Bitoshu Bodko, while he was asking her questions, Amrlo, so she said, I remembered. Nida Ba, a woman who was menstruating, came, Umachsi me, and she pulled me bechevel on one of the strings which was holding the weave in place, which means potentially the woman who was in Nida would have pulled on the strings of the actual weave and made them tamei, right? On Rosh Hashanah at that time, Rabbi Shmuel said, how great are the words of the rabbis. Shlomo, they said, even though the woman purports to have completed her vessel at a time that was in Tara, meaning that she had consistently maintained the Tara throughout the process, nevertheless, you never can tell what suddenly happened, and she might have forgotten or not paying attention, and therefore, Tzichin Tefillah Kodesh, they must be tabled as an extra special precaution before the use for Kodesh, Avalo Truma, even though it's not necessary for Truma. And Shu Maisa Bishas, another Maisa of the woman, Shoysa Regas Bitbachas Acha, she was weaving a certain kerchief, Bitara, assuming she was tor, it was tor. Uvaz Eitzel Rabbi Shmuel. And she came to Rabbi Shmuel Yishoylo to ask him. Amralo, and she said to him, Yodas and Ishlo Nidma, I know it didn't become Tamei. Now Shalon Sati Daiti L'Shomra, I didn't pay attention, however, to safeguard it. We told Shuboka as he was asked your questions. Amralo, she said to him, Oh, Nivska Nima Achas. One of the threads was severed, Ukshartia Befi, and I knotted it with my mouth. It means my saliva came into contact with it. Now the thing is, the woman who's in Nida, actually, the Korbanah says, let me start this sentence. Korbanah says, obviously the woman was in Nida, because otherwise, who cares if she touched her with her saliva? So, L'chaira, how could she have even claimed to make it B'tahara? She was in Nida the whole time. So, Korbanah says, a garment only becomes susceptible to tumor once it reaches the size of 3 by 3 fingers. So she was weaving the initial strand when she was in Nida, thinking she would stop before she got to complete the third of the garment, 3 by 3 inches of the garment. And while she was doing that, she actually put it to her mouth. When she put it to her mouth, the threads were makabel tuma. So that why, because they absorbed the saliva of her Zanita. So amen. So she wasn't safeguarding that.
I'm just curious about in the first incident. It was the Nida, it's Hesed. Wouldn't that be Matame the Truma?
Yeah. You're asking, what you really mean to ask, of course, is that they should have said even a keli which is Nigmar B'tara should require a tefillah before it's used even for Truma.
Right.
Yeah, but Truma, even Truma at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, I think, was the Rabbana, and therefore they weren't so makpid on it. The only mapkin, or at least most Trumas Drabbana.
Because the point is, like you said, I didn't understand the second.
Why by Truma approach? Right. So that's the difference. Okay. So it says more. It says more further. Amrei Shmuel. Shmuel said when he heard this, greater the words of the rabbis. Shamar, they said, even though allegedly, purportedly, it's complete Batara, so we're going to feel a Kodesh, you need tefillah for Kodesh nonetheless. Avul Truma, despite the fact you don't need it for Truma. HaKoytech Mishoferes HaKodesh. By the way, I don't see how anybody can come into this Gemara and say, I love you, Yerushalmi, you're going to stay for this. All right. So I guess we lost him pretty quick. Good way to lose people. It says it further. We had this case already actually for somebody who cuts a reed in order to be used for kedusha for the purpose of sprinkling a mitzvah or such like. You cut it umatbila and you have to toivo it. The person who cuts it umatbila and the person who dunks it in the waters for the purpose of sprinkling, they both don't feel they both require tefillah. Both have to go to the mikveh before they involve themselves in this procedure. Then the guy who cuts it, he has to, because he comes into direct contact with it. However, matbila, if it's just dunking in the waters, you can why don't you just wrap it in a fiber and dunk it down indirectly? Rabbi said, you're right. That guy Taka was dunking, you can dunk it directly, it doesn't require tefillah. The potter, who's the guy who needs to go to the mikveh, you can resolve that say by a person who cut it with the intent of then dunking it, so it's really the one self and the same person who's going to physical contact with it. That's why he has to toivel himself before he actually cuts the reed, which will be used then to the dunk in the waters. All right, Shmuel Levi said, Adkan, all the things that you said in our perek, in our Masechta, I should say, until now, the Kadshe Mikdash Mukudashim, they're referring to the actual karbanos, Kadshe Mikdash, which are holy. Whatever we say pertains also not just to Kadshe Mikdash, but also to Chulin Shinatzal Taras Kodesh, even to Chulin which is made out Taras HaKodesh, into something which is mundane, regular food. But the guy who made this food is trying to preserve it in the same level of Tara as if it was karbanos. The Mechal Mayim, the Aruch Shul brings down that the Bavli says the exact opposite. And he proposes actually changing the gears here. That everything till now in the Masechta is talking about both Chulin Shenas Taras Kodesh and actual kachim. And now, whatever we're going to talk about to random Masechta applies only to actual kachim, not to chulin shnas or taras kodesh. Anyway, there's a dichotomy here. What was before, what was after, obviously is the secondary point. Okay, it says more further. On Rabbi Yochanan, last line. May you do so, Rabbi Akiva, the concept which gets back to by the Keli. No, you were here when I gave the graphic illustration. That all these things are considered to be connected, even though they're not touching. All those dimes, see them 4 times? Those are connected even though they're not touching because the Keli joins them together. That's Medusa Rabbi Akiva. It's not a Doraisa, it's a Drabanan. Rabbi Akiva testified to this effect. The Tzidha we learned over there. Hosif Rabbi Akiva said, added on to those things which are if you touch part of them, the entire thing becomes tamei. He had on soles, flour, bacteria, incense, even though it's made up of fine particles. Unless if you touch one of the particles, the cellular particles, the entire thing becomes tamei. Halavona, frankincense, vagecholim, coals, shenoga tuliyam, miktasam. So we just went to touch part of them. Shapasul fully pass the entire thing. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, so he says that from there we learn the kli is mitzvah. So you touch part of them in the keli, everything else in the keli comes to me as well. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said no. Yoidim ayusha kli sharetz mechabrim. They knew the kli sharetz. If all these things, this vessel is a kli sharetz, one of the vessels used for the service of basic English, it joins everything together. Why is that? So the Ridbas and others bring down because the pasuk says, "Kaf achas asaroz aham liakatoris." 1 spoonful of 10 measures of gold full of katoris by the korbanos in the scene. We learn everything in the kaf. Kol kaf nasa achas. Everything in the kaf becomes 1. So the right of that works. Amav alay. So what's Rabbi Akiva adding? Al shori menachos. Interesting thing. That if you have shiori menachos, you have left over. Obviously, if you took off the komets, the rest of mincha is left over. The sukkah considered to be connected, and even though they no longer require the keli, right? The keli is superfluous at this point. The keli was necessary in order to bring it to mizbeach, but the keli is no longer necessary. Even though the keli is no longer necessary, nevertheless, the keli connects parts of the mincha, which are 2 separate areas of the keli. The nation is cool keli. Why is that? Even though you don't need the keli anymore, because now you just go to eat them. Because once before the komets, all the components of mincha have to be in the same keli. So there was, since at that point, they all needed the keli, so to speak. They're all joined together by the keli. And even after you put the komets on his back, that quality does not fall off. Okay, they're all still united. Okay. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Acha, Rabbi Ela, B'Shem Rabbi Yasa said, Yodam Yisha Kli Sharos Mechaber. Yes, they knew the Kli Sharos connect. Umar Boli, when they come to testify on, Ala Soiles on flour, Vala Ktoires on incense, Vala Lavoino and on frankincense, Vala Gecholim and coals. So if they're all in the same keli, the keli connects them. So that's what they came to say. Now, this is not just the Kli Sharetz. This is any keli. You find any of this in a keli, flour, frankincense, incense, coals, and they are all kodesh. The keli joins them together. So it's a bigger chiddush, not just the Kli Sharetz, but not just one of the keli used for service space mikdash, but any keli.
Since these are ingredients to the korbanos, would that be considered a Kli Sharetz?
Is it actually leaking? Yeah, I better go get a paper towel. It says more further. So in any event, so he says, Rabbi Yasa, that even if it's not a Kli Sharetz, it still is mitzvah to the stuff inside. So it says more, you know what? Nichos, solos, uktoris, lavoina. I understand solos, uktoris, and lavona, they're all integral to the korbanos for which they're, or the processes in the basic mikdash for which they're used. However, kecholim, why join? What is the necessity for gecholim that there should be considered some integration of all the gecholim? They're all considered to be connected. You're at a vessel. For what need you have? For when do you have need for specific coals? They're part of a mitzvah that they should be considered to be integrated and unified when they're in the keli. So Rabun Bar Kana of Tipater became gecholim shel Yom Kippurim. It's coals of Yom Kippur. What did you do with the coals for Yom Kippur, of course?
This seems so weird to me.
For the Kodesh Kodashim. Yeah, what's around?
That the underlying assumption of the Gemara has to be that things are really not connected, except
Would you believe the flour is connected? Palabatish.
Well,
yes.
Why?
It's granules, they're separate, each
Yeah.
is a little granule, like sand.
But it's how you look at it. It's the old
If you
psychological
look at its
problem.
flower, it's connected. If you look at its
Background,
grape, it's
whatever
not.
that thing is, you look at
Figure ground.
figure ground, figure background, you get that kind of.
You know, I'm not making myself clear anyway. It's not flour like this.
Yeah, I understand.
We're trying to connect flour like
Oh, I understand. what you're
flour like that. The coals are also like that.
I understand. But but
Right.
they are. It's not like they're separated. They are in an abstract. They are in something that.
That's a big Kiddush.
I don't know.
To say a defined area makes everyone all at
I
once.
see the Gemara has that attitude. I'm just so intrigued by it. It's just I would not have thought.
By the way, it's a philosophical thing. I forget there's a big philosophical machlokas actually, which is brought down in a book I saw called, we have up in our very quirky and interesting book, written on the 20s, called the Talmud of Madoea Tevel. The Talmud and the Sciences of the World by a fellow named Kamal Har. It's an interesting book. It's worth looking at it once. So he goes through all the sciences, obviously of the time, and how all of them were anticipated by Chazal in various different parts of the Gemara. And then he speaks about philosophy at great length. And he brings down, actually, he says there's a machlokas between the philosophers. What's considered to be the definition of place? How do you find the place of something? So he says it's the place where the thing is, or the place, the area that contains it. And according to this, he explains several machlekes min Chazal. According to this, Chakira. According to this, the thing. So here, actually, it's very interesting. It's a similar thing because you're looking at it. It's bullshit. This is all the
Right.
place. The place is defined by the container.
Right.
But the other side of the issue is that the place is defined by where the thing is spaced inside the keli itself. Okay, so that would actually be an afkamino. He speaks about the case I remember is a case I forget in Bumman. See, I think it is, where you have an egos tzafal gabe keli and the keli tzafal gabe mayim in a chavis. You have, I forget what the word is talking about there. What we're talking about kinyanim or something, but you have a peanut in a boat, a little miniature boat, and the boat is in water, which is in turn in a jug. So what is considered the place of the nut? Is the place yes?
Do you know who Yitzi Stern is?
I know he is. I didn't see him. I don't know where he is. So what's the ultimate place of the nut? So he meant the same thing here with this Gemara, I would say. So it says what? So we need some integration. So the integration here by the coals is the integration of necessity for Yom Kippur. Shekama shuchaytzu machnis, as many as you can shovel out, he brings in. So therefore, the organs to be integrated and unified in the keli which holds it. But the coals of every day, no. Even if they're the same vessel, if they're not physically connected by relying on each other, they're not mitzvah for tumah. If every day some of the coals spread around, just toss them into the irrigation canal or whatever it is, the drainage ditch in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, we see there's no necessity to have all of them, and therefore there is no integration, unification between them when they're in the keli. Ub'Shabbos is just a continuation of Brayso. Ub'Shabbos, if on Shabbos coal spill, so this out of your off the mizbeach or something, kaimin lepas katar, you put on them an inverted vessel to prevent them from burning anybody. On Rav Sanya. Rav Sanya said, "V'chisoyles u'ktoyres u'levoino gecholim." Do soles flour, ktores, incense, levona, frankincense, and gecholim kol. Yesh leim shir eitzel zeh. Do they have a shear by each other? Meaning, we're not talking about here where they're being used in a mitzvah. We're talking about in a storage vessel, right? We're not talking about where there's specific shear. There could be a lot more than the shear here at this point, right? So, Elam, lo mipnei sheniskuku lekelam, what joins together? The fact that they're all unified, they must be held and transported and carried in a vessel. So the vessel joins it together. And if that's the case, they say this is true by the coals. Even though you don't need all of them for shear except for Yom Kippur, there's no shear of coals except for Yom Kippur. Nonetheless, the fact that they must be transported and held and contained in a vessel, that's what makes them join together vis-a-vis Tumah. Now it's important to remember that Gechol and coals are normally not Makabel Tumah. The only reason they're Makabel Tumah in the base of Mikdash is because the principle of Chibas HaKodesh. Chibas HaKodesh is something which is holy. It's a special degree of intensity, which of preciousness, that it imparts tumah to things which normally do not possess tumah, such as charcoal, things like that. Okay?
There's no minimum shear for the Gecholim?
Every day?
No, I know.
No, Yom Kippur it is, but we're talking about the rest of the year. Let's say even the rest of the year the Kli is mitzvah then. Okay? Says more further, Rabbi Pum Bar Chiya, actually this is not bad for you for Chagiga. It's been going pretty well tonight. Rabbi Pum Bar Chiya, right? Rabbi Pum Bar Chiya asked, Kometz Ma'u Shikra B'Shnei Kelim. This is interesting, Shiloh. Can you bring the kometz in two separate vessels? Right? Now, the mincha itself, when you take the kometz, must be in one vessel. And the kometz itself, of course, has a shear. But now, after you took the kometz, you're going to transport it to the mizbeach, and you transport it in two separate little vessels to the mizbeach. Okay, that's the question. So it says the Gemara, it says the vessel joins together. In Tamar, it says, so what do you do with that brisa? In Tamar, because the kometz can be sacrificed in two kelim. For what purpose does it say that the kli is joins them together? Who needs it? It says the kli joins the particles of the kometz together. For what purpose? You can even do two kelim. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Lezer, the Rumya, Rabbi Lezer, the southerner said, located in Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Zina, which Rabbi Yochanan, then Rabbi Yochanan, the Yossi, said name Rabbi Yochanan, why they say Shorei Menachos connect themselves, meaning that despite the fact that they no longer need the Keli, they ought to connect for Tumah, because at one time they needed the keli, even though now they no longer do, but before the mincha was sacrificed. Here too, it's not that the kometz has to be joined together now. Once the kometz is taken, it can be in two separate vessels. At the time it was taken, then it had to be in one vessel. Because at that point, the kometz had to pertain to all of the mincha had to be together, had to be lifted up for the whole mincha. At that point, it had to be in one vessel. But now, later on, two separate vessels are fine too. The kometz can be brought to mizrach in two separate vessels. Okay? I don't know why they would do it. Maybe they want to give an extra kibud, kometz carrier 1 and kometz carrier 2, but because it's very small. Who knows? So it says Gemara, Amar Masania said, it's actually something similar. What Masania says. Masania, similar, not quite the same, but similar. Amar Masania, the Chi and the Shari Torah still takes out the Solus here. Because Solus is the case we're discussing. We want to bring a ride from elsewhere. The Chi Ketores. The truth is the only relevance we have. The only time we have to have one keli is by menachos. Nothing else is be one keli. The Ketores in many little incense and many little keli. Levona the frankincense and little keli. Keichol and the kozik could transport in several keli. Nonetheless, they join together for tumah within one keli. But if you say the keli is mitzarif them, why is the keli mitzarif them? It must be because that's the svara. The keli is mitzaref them regardless of whether they essentially require to be connected or not, as we said on top. So the same thing is true, I guess we were trying to say, by the case of the Shnei Kamatzim. That the Shnei Kamatzim, the two comments which we have, so they join together because prior to that being separated, they were all one keli. Despite the fact that subsequently they no longer have to be in the same keli, since at one time they're in the same keli, that's sufficient, that joins them together. Later on, even though they separate, since they're coming from a time when they were connected, so they had that status of things that are connected, that suffices. Okay? So it says the Gemara, Kahana Shol Rabbanan Tamar. Kahana, the Rav Kahana, by the way, it was called Rav Kahana in the Bavli, but the Rishami is not called Rav because he didn't have the real smicha, it just had the Babylon, the Rav Mani. He just had the Babylonian smicha. He didn't have the true Eretz Yisrael smicha. So Kahana Shal Rabbanan Tamar, Kahana asked the rabbis in Bavel, at the time that he was there, I guess, Mincha Chaluka Begatha, or the Gerson of the Yerusha in the Bavli is Bepisa. If you have a mincha which is divided up in the vessel, now this is the kneading vessel, and all of it is there, but it's divided in two parts. There's a part on the north and a part on the south. And part of the part on the north becomes tamei, but not the part on the south, right? This part and not this part. So what's the status in this case? So nid mezu. Nid mezu. If one becomes tamei, the other one becomes tamei. Amar lei, amrulo. So they said to him, "Yep, nid mezu. One becomes tamei, the other one becomes tamei." As Rav Kahana, the kafza. Tuma, does the Tuma jump from one side of the vessel to the other? Amrullah, they said, yes, the cup to the Tuma. The Tuma jumps. But here perhaps is an even bigger Kiddush. V'afilu, and this Rabbanan of Eretz Yisrael still speaking, Afilu acheres bein osayim. Even if there's another one in the middle. This is a fascinating thing. In two parts of Menachos on either side, right? Here you got another mincha in the middle. These are two halves. Together they make a whole. I don't know why I need two grams here. These are two halves. Together they make a whole, right? But this guy in the middle, he's already whole. So if I touch this one, this is tamei and
Both.
which both?
The other half.
Yes.
Not the middle.
The two halves are not the middle. Because these need the keli to make them a whole mincha, because otherwise they're two halves and not a whole. But this one's a mincha by itself without the keli. So the Tuma transfers from one to the other without hitting the middle one. It's actually the Ravid's interpretation and more that's brought down here by the Meforshim. But that seems to be the Pashim Shot. Okay? There are other Pshatim, but that seems to be the Pashim Shot. So says the Gemara again, okay, so you have this mincha split in two. Can you take kmitza from one on the other? Right? Can you take kmitza from the one side on the other side? So says the Gemara, so they said, Shmur lo shamanu. We didn't hear this as our own personal tradition, our own personal teaching that somebody taught us. However, Mishnah Shani was the Mishnah. Like we learned later on, Shtei menachos. Two menachos from which the kmitza not yet has not been taken. And they got mixed together. If you do kmitza from each one by itself, kisheros, they're kosher. Now, each one by itself, imagine what we're talking about here. It's amazing what you can do with a little bit of ingenuity. Here's one mincha. Here's another mincha. They got mixed together. Can I do the minchas now? Before the koimetz, can I do the minchas? Pashtus not, right? So it says if I can take a kometz from one and a kometz from the other, right, then I can do it. Each kometz, of course, has to be self-contained. So if I can take a kometz isolated from one, I have a kometz isolated from the other, even though the rest of it is mixed together, it doesn't matter. The mincha is a valid mincha. So what do we see here clearly? Says the Gemara. First, because you don't know that the rest of this mincha is actually all in one area. It can be spread out throughout the entire mixture, right? What could possibly make it all kmitza on the right mincha? Must be that Keli joins them all together, and therefore wherever I take the kmitza from, it works on wherever the mincha is, anywhere else in the Keli.
Sounds like very
Well, it's not prayer because it's not after the fact. It's not retroactive. It requires clarification, actually, we don't really have to fully clarify. We just have to assume we're saying is correct. Okay, so it's not fully prayer. So it says the Gemara, again, Kaid needs to Taman, like we learned over there. Shtei menachos shlodik with two menachos for which the kovetz that have taken. V'yisar b'zu b'zuni I mix with each other. V'yachol likol tzizumi V'zuni do kmitza from this one by itself. V'zuni from this one by itself. Ksheris and they're okay. V'ylav and absolutes they're possible. V'yeit shirash shazam I'm seeking zoom. I'm seeking zoom. The main thing is that the shirayim do not interrupt regarding because they're all the same. Keli and the clay joins them together. As Rabbi Yaakov Bar Achor and Rabbi Yatzub Shemri, they both came and they said, Kometz mizu azu, like we just said, Kometz works to take from one half on the other half, even though they're not immediately adjacent, and Nit mezu. When it becomes Tamei, one half becomes Tamei, the other half becomes Tamei. Hamtzois lo mitmeis, but not the middle part. That's how you explained before. L'cheitai, do we now learn kavachas? Ask the Gemara, wait a minute. Why doesn't the middle one become Tamei? Well, in other words, when I pat my quarter in the middle, why doesn't it become Tamei as well? Well, so says the Gemara, and the Gemara backs up the question with a pasuk. Gemara says, did we learn in a brayso? When it says one spoon, it means everything in the spoon is considered to be one. So it says, Chanir said, a keli only joins together something which is asur to it. Asur doesn't mean forbidden, but rather it means, what's the other meaning of the word asur? Besides forbidden. It's actually the same meaning, but just applied differently. What's the other meaning of the word asur? Tied together, knotted. In Aramaic, the word asur means to tie. So which is asur because it's tied up, meaning it's out of your bounds, right? So anyway, so the Gemara says the keli only means the entire thing to char, which it's connected to, which it's bound to. Meaning, if I have two halves on either side, so they need the keli, so therefore the keli joins together. As opposed to the quarter in the middle, which stands on its own, it doesn't need the keli, and therefore it stands on its own. Okay, says the Gemara. Rav Shira Lakish boy. Shira Lakish asks a very interesting question. Three menachos, a dry portion of mincha, which wasn't kneaded with water or flour, whatever the oil. Whatever they're kneading with, it doesn't have therefore the moisture which the rest of the mincha has. So it has become tummy. Moisture works because it's machshir l'kabel tumah, but this is never machshir l'kabel tumah. It's sweet. It stays dry the whole time. So nevertheless, it's mekabel tumah. The one that says it's mekabel tumah because of chibas hakodesh. Chibas hakodesh, if it's precious in hektish. It's mekabel tumah, at least min rabbanan, even though it's not the height of it's not the height. Well, actually, it's Gemara's going to ask: is it the standard height of tumah or not? Let's see exactly what Gemara says. Why should I bother saying too much? Says more further. Interesting question. It's not really Tamei Toraisa. It's Tamei because of Chibas HaKodesh. Is there Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi by Tumah because of Chibas HaKodesh? Or, since Chibas HaKodesh is only, according to most Shitas, I guess I should say, so I think there is a Shita of Chibas HaKodesh Toraisa. According to most Shitas of Chibas HaKodesh is the Rabbana, so therefore what if what is well, not just what if, but is there Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, Revi? Is there really mimic Tumah D'Oraisa in total? and therefore has Rishon Sheni Rish Shlish Revi, or it's just a new Tumah, meaning generic, anything which is Tumah, which has Chivas HaKodesh, it becomes Tumah, but there are no gradations in its Tumah. Okay, it's just generic Tumah. So it says the Gemara, hey, so Rabbi Lezer asked the question, or rather he proposed the following. Vaksida say we call asher yeyochel from any food which is in asher yeyochel mayim yitmo, upon which word comes it will be tummy, but not just it will be tummy, it will be matame others. Yitma, we can read yitame, that's going to make others tummy. Esher tumasai de mayim, which means that which comes tummy because it came in contact with water. Osaminian, from there you can count down the ladder, notch 1, notch 2, notch 3, etc. However, as Sheitu Mosai de Mayim, so which doesn't become Tameh through water, and Osaminian, it doesn't have counts. Okay, so it's Richam Nachos would therefore become Tameh or Apostle, whatever you want to call it, but it can't be Apostle or anything else. That's how we were learning it. Okay, because it was never Mukhshar, the Kabbalah Tumah, all it had is Chivas HaKodesh. Chivas HaKodesh doesn't allow for gradations. This actually comes out alright, says one further. Hey, to Rabbi, whoever it is, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's question, Arei Nivlas of Tohar. What about a dead Purdue, well, it's actually, dead Purdue chicken, right? Nivlas of Tohar. Harei Matami Tumas Ochlim below Hechsher. We know it's Matami Tumas Ochlim, even if you didn't become moist if you swallowed it. It's Matami, you even if it doesn't mean, well, that's a better time because it comes moist on the way down. But we know that Nivas of Tor is Matami Tumas Ochlim, becomes Tamei Tumas Ochlim. The lighter degree of Tumah, below Hechsher without becoming moist. Uvelo Tumah, and even though it doesn't come into contact with something tamei other than itself. Why is that? Because eventually it's going to have the tumah nevela. How does it have the tumah nevela? How does the nivlas of tahar make it tamei? Swallowing, right? So even before you swallow it, and even though it doesn't receive any beverage or any water on top of it, we call it tamei because of, or it's susceptible to tumah because of what? Why it's susceptible to tumah even though it's not wet or moist?
It's going to come moist and strong.
Even more basic than that.
It's because it's a vegetable from Tomei. Not
What?
because once you swallow, it does become hard. It has nothing to do with the liquid. It's just
Yes, why does it become tamei? There is no liquid. You know, there's this game, I forget what this game was. Years ago we had this board game, and they had inventions in the board game, special wacky inventions. And the inventions actually, there were patents granted for them, and you were supposed to invest in them. I don't know exactly what it was, how the game worked, I don't remember. And one of the games was one of the inventions in the game was a self-kicking machine.
Oh.
So when you realize that you did something, you messed up on something, you can kick yourself without having to resort to somebody else's prowess in doing so. Anyway, so we can get out those machines for you guys, because the reason why it becomes tamei is because of Chibas HaKodesh. Right? That's what's talking about.
it's over Tomei.
Oh boy, I should get a key machine for myself. Ooh, that's embarrassing. Sorry, I apologize. You're right. We're not talking about the kachim here. Mea culpa. Very. This is nivlas of tar is metame to sochel blow extra blow tuma, not because of chibas kosh, but because of tuma d'Rabbanan in and of itself. In and of itself, because they were goyser tuma on it, despite the fact that it's not moist, despite the fact that it's not food yet. Well, I guess it's considered food. So, but food, it's just because it's not moist. No, and also because it didn't, despite the fact that it didn't come into contact with anything tamei. In other words, it didn't come into contact with anything tamei other than itself, It was not moistened. Eventually, though, when somebody swallows it, it's going to be Matame him. So Chazal made it Tomei from the get-go.
We can
To Macau.
We don't become tummy by picking chicken.
We do.
I thought yes. I thought you could go to.
That's to make you Tomei Tuma Chamura. That's to make you Tomei Tuma the rice that you have to go to the mikveh. The Tuma the Rabbanan, that Ochel is Tomei, what does that make you do? What do you have to do after you become Tomei? Wash your hands, that's all.
So if you go to the store and you pick up a frozen green chicken, you have to wash your hands.
I know if it's in plastic, if you have to do it. But if theoretically you picked up a fresh one, yeah, you have to wash your hands. Okay, so says Gemara. That was embarrassing. Sorry, I tried to make fun of you guys and ended up embarrassing myself. It serves me right. Eitzimri. So the time do masochlim without being mukshar l'kabel tuma, uvlo without any addition outside source of tuma, they should suffer time tumas chamura because eventually it's going to become tamei nivla sof tor. So if that's the case, why don't we give something the tzricha menachos? We should give it a tuma kalu at least in the meantime, because eventually it can be matame tuma chamura, right? So what's the difference? Right, we should give it a gradation of tumah, just like because eventually it could be matame other types of tumah, if and when water comes over it or whatever the case may be. So it says, Ma'ikadun, what do we conclude here? Mikola ochel asher yochel, I'll tell you. And from any food you can eat. Esher tumasu mishum ochel, if the tumah is because it's food, oisem minyan, then they're great. Say no minyan, there are no gradations in its tumah. It's either tumah or not, it doesn't have rishon, sheni, shlishi, etc. Okay, says the word now. Before I go on, actually, the Bavli in Menachos argues and counts, says that eating something which is chibas hakodesh, there are gradations: rishon, sheni, shlishi, revi. And I said before, chibas hakodesh only the rabbanan. There in the Bavli, it's Menachos. It sounds like it actually might be the Raisa, but anyway, it's not clear. Even here, it's not really clear 100%. But in any event, in regards to the Chibas Kodesh, the rest of the Rabbanan, the Rambam Paskins that there are gradations, Rishon, Sheni, and Shlishi, and something which never came into contact with water, but it does become Tai because of Chibas HaKodesh. Rabbi Yosef Shei Rebbe said, there's a new sugya. Ochel Shlishi. If somebody eats food which is a Shlishi B'truma. Now, Shlishi B'truma is the bottom rung in the ladder, right? There's nothing past Shlishi and Truma. So actually, if you eat it, what should you become? A Revi, which doesn't exist, right? Says more, gotcha. Shlishi B'truma, nipsal gufo milecho Truma. If you eat Shlishi B'truma, your goof becomes possible to eat Truma. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. The way it sounds like now, it's like Xera. Even though you can't get Shlishi can't make Revi by Truma, nonetheless, we made Xera. If you ate if you ingested a shlishi, so regard you as a walking shlishi, and therefore it shouldn't eat truma, even though you can't make revi by the truma, but nevertheless, it doesn't look right. That's how I would have learned Ba'abadish. But the more actually later on, Yechesel will say it's more elaborate than that. If I eat shlishi of truma touches the saliva in my mouth, what does saliva in my mouth now become? Theoretically, it shall become revi. But Chazal always made a gzeira that mashkin, I'm sure you remember this, mashkin always become a Rishon. They always go up to Rishon, right? So it's mashkin always go up to Rishon. So therefore, what do I become? Since my saliva is a Rishon, I'm a Sheni. So that's why I can't eat the Truma. Okay? What? That's bad?
It's just because to be mashkin is something that's exterior. It's mashkin inside you.
So what?
Yeah, it's all part of it. So you're already a shlishi. Your saliva is a Rishon, and then you become a Sheni.
No, you ate shlishi. You ate shlishi.
You ate shlishi.
Right.
So you become a sheni because your saliva is a rishon.
You got it. Okay? Oh, come on. You see much worse than this. Says she battled hardened veterans by now. Says Rashuli Yitzchak said, this is actually the Bavli here. It says in the Chulin. I don't remember it, but it says it. It says more. Rashul Yitzchak said, "Boy, ma he asks, what is this for Rabbi Lezer? It's like Rabbi Lezer, see that we learned over there, Ochel Ochel Rishon, somebody eats Ochel Ochel Rishon. Somebody eats Ochel, which is Rishon, he becomes a Rishon. Ochel Ochel Sheni, Sheni becomes a Sheni. Ochel Ochel Shlishi, Shlishi, he becomes a Shlishi. So here too is that we're saying, that if you eat the Truma, which is Shlishi, you become a Shlishi, and somehow a Shlishi shouldn't eat Truma, because you're puzzled, right? As the language of the Bride said, Bimsal Gufo Milacho Truma. You're a puzzle, and therefore it's not properly Truma. Abiyah Rabbi Lezer says more no. Divrei Akoli. Everybody agree with this. Kidei she'abadol min Truma. It's in order that you should separate yourself from eating Truma, meaning in order to make sure that you're not matamei Truma. So therefore they made a special gzeira on you that if your body is puzzle, that you can, if you ate shlishi, then you cannot eat Truma, in order that you shouldn't come to careless abuse of Truma in some other way. Well, the Kavasos asks more. What about this? We say simply ochel sheni b'maiser. If you eat food which is a sheni by maiser sheni, which is of course as low as you can get, nifsal gufin lo'ochel maiser, do you now become considered to be a rishon that you can't eat maiser? Of course, that really makes no sense, right? At best, what can you be, taking the saliva theory into account? Sheni, and the sheni is not going to make maiser a sheni. By truma, you can understand. You ate a shlishi, but the mashke becomes a rishon, you become a sheni, and sheni can pass on the truma. But the more wants, so maybe it is taka blanket gzeira, balabatish. So maybe what it's happening is that when you eat sheni, makani ma'aser sheni, which is sheni, because then you will become a sheni again, and when you become a sheni again, you still can't eat the ma'aser sheni. That's Mara's question here, okay? So it says the Gemara, the Shemini Minado, let's hear from now. Let's write from here. But Chachamim osim a ma'aser. The Chachamim forbid ma'aser, and it should be. What does it mean? Chachamim ma'aser. It should be take out the words v'lo shmiya. Should be lo shmiya. It should be v'amar Rabbi Shmuel b'shem Rabbi Zera ma'al Chachamim ma'aser. What does it mean? Chachamim forbid ma'aser. Nifsal gufo milacho ma'aser. If you eat you're not allowed to eat ma'aser. Now this doesn't say what you did, but the Rashi, the Korban Eidah, helpfully brings it down. He says that anything, if you ate ochlin tmein, or did you any one of the other things which makes you tamei, tumah d'rabbanan, like tumah d'rabbanan, you can't eat ma'aser sheni. Now if you ate ochlin tmein, then you only become a sheni. Nonetheless, you can't eat ma'aser sheni. So therefore, if you ate, we see it in this taka gzeira. If you ate sheni, you cannot go and eat ma'aser sheni, right? Even though theoretically it should be possible because you're not making, there's no shlishi, and even after the saliva, you're still learning the sheni, which won't make shlishi. Nevertheless, it's a blanket gzeira. Okay? The Kavasah, now they asked a similar question. You knew this question was coming. You knew for sure this question was coming. With the Kavasah, ha'ochel ochel revi'i b'kodesh. If you ate revi'i by kodesh, we say nimsal gufo milacho b'kodesh, is he forbidden to eat kodesh or not? Okay? Or is revi'i so far gone that Chazal didn't extend their gzeira so far? The Shemini Radah, here from here. Don't Rabbi this is talking about, by the way, in Onain. And because later on, we'll see, in Chagiga, and Onain is considered like Revi'i B'Kodesh. Now he's not, of course, he's a mourner. He's not a Tomei. And he's an Onain. But nevertheless, they gave him the status as Revi'i. Why? Because he's not allowed to eat. So they decided, everyone understands that Tomei is not allowed to eat. So let's just call him a Tomei. Okay? So says the Gemara, so they said later on, don't really share above our memo, also so called Revi'i B'Kodesh. It's only they made it like Revi'i. Adamras teaches us why to make a Revi'i. Who cares? There's no Chamishi B'Kodesh, so why bother? So it must be a Ochel Revi'i B'Kodesh. Adamra teaches us somebody eats Revi'i B'Kodesh. Nifsal Gufo Milacho Kodesh. You can't eat Kodesh because otherwise there's no possible understanding to what they gain by making a Revi'i unless you say the Revi'i cannot eat Kodesh. Okay? Says that makes sense by true, or that is understood, that we understand applies to true korbanos. What about chulin shenasu taras kodesh? To say they apply to chulin, regular stuff, but were made by somebody who's meticulous in preserving the kedusha of that which he eats. So all this applies then as well. So Shmini Minado. Let's hear from here. What time do you guys have? Alright, just so if you can do 2 more lines. I don't think we actually can, but let's try anyway. Let's start from here. We learned over there. Shochi behema v'chayev ha'of. You shechted an animal or a bird, lo yetzer medu dam. No blood, didn't bleed. Ksherim, they're kosher, doesn't matter. But you can eat them even with hands of tratami. It says afapi, but it should be lefi. There's no blood. So what made him mukshur l'kabel tuma? You're allowed to eat even if your hands are tami. Rabbi Shimon Omer hukshu b'shchita. Shimon says no. Shchita is machshavim. And this is obviously considered the Rabbanan. But he says since they were slaughtered and slaughtering is matter to eat, so slaughtering is as if it made them moist, the preparation to eat, and therefore it's as if they're mukshur l'kabel tuma, right? So it says who cares? We're talking about chulin. Who cares? Your hands are tamei. Yadayim slavas means what? They're shiny, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to make the chulin shlishi? There ain't no shlishi by chulin, right? So who the heck cares? So it says the Gemara, as you said, must be mastisha shnasu al gav kodesh. Must be the chulin which is made as if it's kodesh, and we see we're makbid. And it says here, Kirabi Yeshua, but all the Farshim say, Udulo Kirabi Yeshua. It's talking about, not like Rabbi Yeshua. Because Rabbi Yeshua holds that there is no Shlishi by Chulin Shanasu L'Taras HaKodesh. It has to be that there is Shlishi, because otherwise this whole brisa makes no sense. Okay, we'll stop here. It continues on in this vein. It was pretty easy for Chagiga, I must say. You seemed all to stay more or less awake. And,
totally unrelated to
yes.
this thing. Once it said, the Shechita doesn't require that. Remember, Brown said that Mila
has that. Must have that. Right, otherwise it's not about Mila.
Right.